Yep, yep. I have my good days and I have my bad days,
Yeah,
but generally I'm doing okay.
good,
Yeah.
good.
I
Yeah.
start cardiac rehab on Tuesday, or at least I go for a consultation
Uh-huh.
um to start doing cardiac rehab. I mean, my physical therapy people had me doing some leg exercises, things to do to start building up strength, and but they the upper body stuff. I don't like to do anything with. Start building up strength, and but they the upper body stuff. They get mm, everything I everything I say is like being repeated back. It's interesting.
Right, yeah, because I think I don't know if you can you hear me now, Warren?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
Oh,
because
oh
I'm trying to get onto YouTube tonight rather than Facebook, and I'm getting right onto YouTube, but um okay, now I can't hear you at all on YouTube. Okay, I can't hear you.
uh, and now, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Um, oh, by the way, did you were you able to open that the attachment I sent in the
I
email?
was. Yes, I was. I read it, and I'm going to use it next week
Oh, okay.
because that's
Yeah.
going to fit right in with
Yeah,
the.
this book is very, very well because Haggai, Ezra, Zechariah, they all tie in together. It's amazing how that happens.
Right. And so, yeah, I'll be using that. I'll be doing that next week.
Okay,
As
yeah, no,
I,
just wanted to make sure that you were able to
oh
get
yeah,
it.
able to
Okay.
get it up and I printed it out for myself. I sat out there on the back porch eating my breakfast and curds and whey, and along came a spider and all that kind of stuff. So,
It's funny you talk about that because I have to. I've been forcing myself to take these protein drinks. It's supposed to help build up muscle because what happened after surgery, I lost about 10, 15 pounds. But they say that it's not the fat that you lose muscle mass. And which is why they're being very, very um, forceful about telling me to do these exercises and doing walking and different things like that because uh, I got to rebuild muscle, and I'm finding it's hard to do. I never thought I would ever have that kind of a problem, but uh, yeah, I have to rebuild muscle. So anyway, I had this is it's a big tub of powder, and something that my rabbi uses because he's very athletic and it's supposed to help boost protein so to help increase your muscles. So, and of course, my wife who's an RN, she says that after you get a little older, that you start losing because of age, you start losing muscle mass. And so and so I'm that coupled with the fact that I lost so much just post op, I'm trying diligently to try to get myself back into some kind of shape.
all right, okay, well, good deal. Okay, so I'm still trying to get this thing going to where I can.
Hey, Martha.
Hi, Joseph. Hi, Joy. Hi, Rabbi. Hi, Warren.
Hey,
Hi, everybody else.
Hello.
Hey, Martha, I want to tell you that
Yes.
today we got an email from our Sunday school class over in Second Baptist Church,
Uh-huh.
Divine, and they said the whole Sunday school class, they voted at about 80, more than 80% of people approved. So the whole Sunday school class Divine over in Second Baptist Church is going to move to First Baptist Church of Katy, starting on October 5th.
They're gonna do what now? They're gonna.
You didn't hear me? Okay.
I don't think I understood what you were saying.
Okay. The Sunday school class over in Second Baptist Church,
Okay.
before I came to the Tree of Life, the church member, the Sunday school class, everybody kind of had a vote, and they agree the whole Bible study class is going to move to First Baptist Church of Katy
Oh my.
and started from October 5th. And they already talked to the pastor over in First Baptist Church of Katy. So the pastor agreed to get the Divine Sunday School class, have their own Sunday School class. And so basically the whole Sunday school is moving from Second Baptist Church to the First Baptist Church of Katy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, because they just everybody just feel it's too hard to stay in Second Baptist Church with the pastor. Whatever he's doing is just a disgrace to God, and so the whole Bible study class they just exodus from Second Baptist Church to the First Baptist Church of Katy.
Wow. I'm not surprised. It's that extreme. Well, what did they expect, huh? What did they expect?
Yeah, they will be started October 5th, first week in October.
Okay. All right.
Okay, guys, it's 7 o'clock here now, and we do have a minion. So let's you'll notice that tonight I'm not on I'm not on Facebook. I am on YouTube, and so it's just a little bit different, some of the things that I've got to do. And so hopefully this is going to work out okay. I've got it, I'm recording to my own computer now also, so that if it does mess up, I can go back and retrieve things. But at any rate, I wanted to get away from Facebook as best I can, and we're gonna try to keep doing that anyway. So let's see. I'm still trying to figure out the view thing here and see what it will do or what it won't do. So I think we're good to go though. We're on YouTube and I'm recording, and I believe everyone can see my my screen. Is my screen still up? The handout screen, or the minor prophet guy with the sitting there taking notes.
No, we don't
I
see
don't
that
see it.
one.
You don't see that? Okay, well then that's where I need to, because I thought it did. Okay.
Okay,
Now
there
you
it
see it.
is. Yes.
Now we
Now,
got it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, good deal. All right, so now my screen looks right too. So it just nothing was working right, and I had hit that share screen, but it just didn't do. Okay, here we go. So well, let's go ahead and get started. I think everything is working out right, and good to have Delisa back with us today, and she's been out for a while, and so good to have you with us, Delisa. And I've got everybody muted. So whenever you need to say something, go ahead and uh, just open up your mic and say away. So let's go with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asoch b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe, sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. Okay, so I want to welcome everyone in here tonight to the introduction and chapter 1 of Hggai. And Hggai, it's that one was an easy one to pronounce, and I'd heard it pronounced all sorts of other ways, but I'd always pronounced it Hggai, so that worked. And so here we are. And let me go ahead and go to our little timeline here, and you'll see where I've got Hggai circled here so that you can kind of get going. And then what I did was made up this chronological deal here, so chart, so that you can kind of get an idea of where Hggai falls into this. Now we'll see that his writing, the 4 months that he was writing and warning Judah, was here in 520 BCE, and you'll see some of these other things. And I don't have time to go through the history of all of this. Maybe you know these things and maybe not, but it's up there so that you can look them up if you can. I would encourage you to do that if you're a little fuzzy on the history. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit as an intro. Now, I don't know how far we're going to get tonight. I really, really don't, because in my notes I've got almost 5,500 words in notes, and so generally speaking, 2,000 words is about 45 minutes. So I'm going to have to cut short some words, or we'll just go to where we are. And I had an hour's worth of words after 2 verses. So we'll just see how this all goes tonight. And if we don't get through the chapter, then okay, fine. But I wanted to kind of bring you up to speed on what general Jewish tradition about Haggai is. Now, it's undebatable. He was a prophet in the late Babylonian exile time frame, and in fact, he may possibly have written had seen the destruction of the temple, went into exile with all of the Judeans, and then was brought back at the end of the 70 years. And so we really don't know. There's just a couple of hints in the writings there that would kind of push us toward that idea. But if he did see the destruction of the temple, then by the time that he wrote this, he would have been very, very old. And so it's we just don't know how it turns out, or how old he was, if he did see the temple, if he didn't see the temple destroyed. But you almost never in Jewish writings and so forth, you almost never see Haggai uh, mentioned alone as a standalone book. He's always associated in Jewish writings with Zechariah or Zechariah if you're from Texas, and Malachi if you're from Texas. And so you always they run together. All of those three books, of course, Haggai and Zechariah are they were contemporaries. They were there at the same time together. So anyway, we and they're in the um, uh, Jewish philosophy or whatever their traditions. They suggest sometimes that maybe that these guys, the three of them, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, were often they were the guys in the lion's den with Daniel, and that's written in the Megillah 3a and Sanhedrin 94a. So, that's not a tradition that is followed in our world today, but too much. But it is Jewish tradition that possibly these three guys were in the lion's den. They'd gotten thrown in the den with Daniel. So so let's go ahead with kind of who these guys are. He just dates himself or calls himself Haggai the prophet, and started writing on the 29th of August in 520 BCE, and then he finished up in the 18th of December. That was his last message. The 18th of December in 520 BC. So we're only talking about September, October, November, and not quite 4 months of these four messages that he had put out. And so the location of where he was most assuredly Jerusalem, or certainly maybe right outside of Jerusalem. And his audience, or the people that he was writing to and prophesying to, was the governor Zerubbabel, and the high priest Joshua, and the regular priests, and then also the people of Jerusalem, the people of Judea. So those were his four target audiences there: the governor, the high priest, the regular priest, and the people. So a little bit of historical background. And I think it's important that we go through that, because this is the first of the prophets, the minor prophets that we've been studying, that were that they are doing their writing and their prophesying. Their ministry is after the destruction of the temple in 586. Most assuredly, it was after the destruction. And the other ones, there were a couple of the books that people speculate, well, was it, before, was it after, was it late exile, or was it after the exile? We don't know. Was it written by a bunch of guys that just edited, something? But this one here is pretty sure that it was during the exile, right at the end of the exile, even to the point of returning to. In fact, we know it's when they've returned to Jerusalem, because that's the whole theme of what he's talking about. So we know that Jerusalem and the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av in 586 BCE. And then Cyrus allowed repatriation of the Jews to Jerusalem, to Judea, in 538 BCE. And so the there were at least three waves of returnees that took advantage of this opportunity. And the first of these was a group of almost 50,000 Jews that returned under the leadership of Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel, who replaced him, in fact. And they did that in 537 BCE. And you can read about that in Ezra 1, 2, and 4, 2 to 4. And another view is that Sheshbazzar was the Chaldean name of Zerubbabel. We don't know. So Ezra led the second wave of it was 1,700 men plus women and children. So maybe another 5,000 came back in 458 BC, and then Nehemiah led the third wave of 42,000 back to back in, and he was in 444 BCE. So here we have, almost 100,000 people came back to repatriate and to resettle Jerusalem, Judea, and the surrounding areas. And the thing about it is that we're told, I don't know how they figured this out, but they're told that only 20%, that only represented 20% of the people that were in Babylon in the captivity. So if that be the case, that there was 100,000 of them that came back, and that was only 20%. Well, then that would mean that there were only 500,000 of them that had gone into captivity. So if I got my numbers straight, I'm trying to do this in my head. So anyway, that's they say that the population that came back into Jerusalem was only 1/3 of its pre-exilic side, and that's estimated between 13,000 or so to 20,000 or so. And the capital city of Jerusalem was only like 1/5 of its pre-exilic size. So anyway, it was just a small amount of people in comparison to the ones that actually went into exile. And the reason they didn't come back was because they were living the good life over in Babylon. They didn't, they had got in there, started businesses, they did well. And so they said, well, I don't want to go back to Jerusalem where there's people that don't like us, and it would be tough, and there's no infrastructure there. There's certainly no internet there where we got good stuff here in Babylon. So they didn't go. So so during the year that followed that first group of returnees, they rebuilt the main altar in Jerusalem, and they resumed offering sacrifices on it. They celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles, and they laid the foundation for the reconstruction of the Second Temple. Now, and the Second Temple is, of course, the temple that these guys were trying to rebuild. And the first temple is that Solomon's temple. Okay, so first temple was destroyed in 586. Then they started working on the second temple, and of course they got some things built up, and then later on Herod the Great spent like 46 years rebuilding and building up the second temple to where it was just a marvelous edifice that if it had survived, I'm sure would have been like one of the eighth or ninth wonders of the world. So but there was some opposition to rebuilding the temple from the local yokels there, and you remember when they were trying to build to fortify the walls, they said that they worked with a trowel in one hand, building up the walls, and a sword in the other, and being vigilant because there were all sorts of people that did not want them to rebuild in Jerusalem. So then in 520 BC, as a result of the reconstruction was halted for 16 years. And so once it was halted, then there really was an apathy that set in. And so people just said, well, yeah, the enemy's around. They don't want us to build it. So we'll just go along to get along. And so it just really settled into an apathetic attitude toward the temple. Then in 520 BC, as a result of changes in the Persian government and the preaching of Haggai, the people resumed rebuilding the temple. Now, I don't know if you realize that Darius, who's the one that said that they could come back and start rebuilding this, he was the son of Esther and Ahasuerus in the book of Esther. Well, Darius was her son, and of course that made him Jewish too. So that is kind of interesting that here he is in Persia. He's ruling the world, and he says, "Yeah, the Jews can go home." So I don't know if his mama was still alive, and he she persuaded him or what, but it was in 520 that Haggai first called on the people to resume the construction, and then Zechariah soon joined him by giving additional prophecies. And Zechariah's ministry lasted much longer than Haggai's, but anyway, the returnees finished the project about 5 years after Haggai had started preaching at them to get this thing done. So and that was done in 515 BC. Now, one way of calculating the 70-year captivity is from the first deportation to Babylon, and that would have been in 605. And you count from there to the year temple reconstruction began, which was 536. And so there you get your 70 year kind of a thing. Another way to count is from the destruction of the temple in 586 to the completion of the temple restoration in 515 BC. We don't know. It's just there's two different ways of counting that, and it's certainly not something that we would spend a whole lot of time arguing over. Okay, now what was? Are there any comments or questions so far on this that I'm going? Okay, so then the message. Haggai's the first in the last group of prophetic Old Testament books, okay, along with Zechariah and Malachi. These books reveal life in the restoration community of Israelites. The historical book of Ezra deals with the same time period and the same group of people. It's a remnant of Israelites. They were back in the land, and they were following the Babylonian captivity. And the returnees remembered stories of the past glories of their nation before the captivity, but they also felt a great deal of shame because they returned to a land that was controlled by the Gentiles. And these were very difficult and discouraging times for them. Their hopes were very ghostly or shadowy, or they're just like a mist. It doesn't last, and it was uncertain and just fraught with all sorts of troubles. So this was not the glorious return to the land that former prophets had promised. So that's where we look at the return, and we say, well, you know what? Maybe that glorious return is going to be at a much later time. And so I think we'll see that some of the glorious return and the building up of Israel is going to be when the Messiah returns to earth and sets up his millennial kingdom in Jerusalem. So, but Haggai had he has a single burden from the Lord, and his job was to motivate these people to get busy and rebuild their temple so that they could resume life in obedience to the Mosaic law. Now, Zechariah also helped him in the mission, and Malachi lived some 90 years after that. And he uttered the final warning from Adonai to his people in the Old Testament. That was the final thing that was actually canonized. There's other writings, but none of those writings were accepted as canon. So about 18 years before Haggai ministered in 538 BC, we said that the 50,000 Jews had returned, and then a year later they began to build the temple. So they finished repairing the foundation, and they were starting with the superstructure when opposition from the native people of the land, known as the Samaritans. Remember where that came from? When in 722 BCE, when Samaria fell, and the Assyrians brought their own people in there to settle the land and assimilate with the remaining Jews that were in that land. They became known as Samaritans, and they were a hated race by the Jewish people, even up until the time of Yeshua. And he had to kind of talk to his disciples about their attitudes.
But they were Jewish, right? The Samaritans.
No, they were so that they had a form of Judaism, but it was so far removed from true Judaism because it had assimilated some of the foreign gods and customs and practices, and so you'll see that in the Samaritans, even in Yeshua's time, they had their own temple. They had their own altar. They offered sacrifices that were similar to what would be done in Jerusalem, but they did it on Mount Gerizim.
So I guess what I'm asking is, I'm trying to understand this. So they were Jewish people who went off and did their own thing instead of following the Torah and God's way, or not.
Well, they were initially they were the leftover Jews that the Assyrians did not carry off into captivity.
Yeah.
But the Assyrians brought in a whole slew of folks, and they assimilated over the
okay.
years to the point watered down the population such
right.
that the Jewish people, and certainly in Yeshua's time, considered the Samaritans as kind of half breeds, and they're not really Jews. They were not even cousins. They were despicable people in the mind of the Jewish people. So it was a very uneasy relationship there with these folks. So so for about 17 years, they didn't do any work on the temple because there was just so much opposition from the Samaritans. But then the Lord led Haggai to challenge the people and stir them on to resume the temple reconstruction. And so he delivered 4 short messages in 520 BC, and that got the people working again. The people went to work after hearing his first message, but then a difficulty arose and they stopped working. So then the prophet delivered a second message, and the people got back to work. After a while, another difficulty arose. The people stopped working again, and then Haggai delivered 2 messages on the same day, and that kind of got the Jews over the top to resume and finish their project. So I think one of the reasons that Haggai has been reserved and has survived all these years is that it's a message for all humanity, and it has permanent value. And the book of Haggai, first, it's a revelation of the perils that often accompany a period of adversity or trials and troubles, and then second, it reveals the duty of the people of faith in that kind of a situation to basically suck it up, gird up their loins, be strong, hazak, and try to fight through all of that stuff and persevere through all. Don't give up is what it would be. And so Haggai, his 4 messages deals with one of these perils. The 4 perils are he dealt with each one of the perils. The 4 perils are: number 1, misplaced priorities; number 2, the incorrect perspective; number 3, unrealistic expectations; and 4, unnecessary fears. So let's look at each one of these. Here's the solutions or some more information about that. The first peril was a problem of misplaced priorities. The people didn't think that the time was right to proceed with the rebuilding of the temple. Why? Because they were waiting for some kind of an indication from God that they should resume building, and all they got was trouble from their neighbors. Every time they tried to rebuild, neighbors would come along with their slings and arrows and stuff and bop them in the head, and it was just a dangerous time. So they got busy then building their own houses, their own businesses, and their things for themselves, and they pretty much forgot God's previous commands to come out of Babylon and rebuild the temple. And they were very, very motivated to rebuild their own homes and do things for themselves, building up their businesses and so forth. And what they saw their own need and proceeded to do something about it. They just did not do anything with the temple for those 16 years. But and when it had come to building a house of honor that would honor Adonai, enable them to worship and get back to the sacrificial system that God had set up, and basically build God's reputation among the heathens there again. Well, they just didn't do it. Here, 16, 17 years had passed, and it was the long past time for them to finish the temple structure, but they just put everything on hold so that they could do their own thing. So the second peril then, and the solution to that was get back to rebuilding the temple. Okay, you've slacked off enough, get back to rebuilding the temple. The second peril was the problem of incorrect perspectives. And so when the workers began rebuilding again, some of the people started comparing the structure that they were working on to the previous temple that the Babylonians had destroyed. They were looking back at Solomon's temple, what a glorious thing it was and how great it was. Remember, it was It was covered in gold, and it was just a beautiful thing. And they were saying that this present temple that they're building from the rocks, the stones that were left over from the destruction, was nothing compared to Solomon's temple. So, and some of the older people who had seen the former temple, they wept and they compared the two structures and told the younger people, "Oh, this is terrible. This thing that we're doing is not even worth doing because it is so it's just so ugly and so small and so terrible compared to Solomon's temple." That they discouraged people, and I'm sure that there was a whole lot of oy veying going on there during that time. And so anyway, the third peril was a problem of unrealistic expectations. The people thought that they had taken on a project of rebuilding the temple, that once they started it, God was going to bless them greatly and immensely, I mean, immediately, and it's just all going to be like winning the lotto, And so they looked at their external obedience as what God, that God should start blessing them right now. And Haggai reminded them that it was wholehearted devotion to God that was necessary in order to obtain his blessing, not just piling one stone on top of another. They had to really get in there and follow God with all of their heart. So and so basically the thing was that they needed to get back to Torah, following Torah, listening to the priest that would tell them, okay, this is how we do our sacrifices. Remember, they had been out for 70 years. A lot of these people had never done proper sacrifices, so they had to be re-educated. So finally, the fourth peril was a problem of unnecessary fears. Now, the people looked at the strength of the Gentile nations around them, and I don't know that the nations were all that strong at this point, but because Babylon was they were the largest, most powerful of the nations. Certainly, Egypt may have been strong, but anyway, they looked around, and the people that were harassing the Samaritans, it wasn't really even a nation. It was just a bunch of city-states that were harassing them. And so the Jews were kind of like they were when they came out of Egypt, and God said, let's go into the promised land. They said, oh no, there be giants in the land. And so they didn't go. And I think it's pretty much a similar thing here, where the Jews looked around, they saw little problems, and they elevated them to problems that would just keep them from going and doing what God wanted them to do. So Haggai had to remind them that that God would judge the Gentile nations one day. Don't worry about it. God's got everything under control, and he's going to take care of it. So they needed to look beyond the immediate future and believe God's promises concerning Israel's ultimate restoration and exaltation over the nations. One of the things I think we don't we fail to realize a lot of times is, remember the promises that God gave to Abraham. He believed them till his dying day, but guess what? He never saw the promise fulfilled. Same with Isaac. He never saw the promise completely fulfilled. Jacob. In fact, he died in Egypt in an environment of not slavery yet, but it was certainly not a good environment. He was even outside the promised land. So all these guys, but they hung on to their faith that God was eventually, one of these days, it's going to be taken care of. So with regard to the misplaced priorities, the people's duty was to get back to rebuilding the temple. They needed to give priority to what God said they should be doing, rather than doing what they prefer to do, like working on their own houses. The dynamic there that God would provide was His enabling presence with them. He promised to be with them and help them. And so then the second problem there, the incorrect perspectives. Again, their duty was to be strong and just get to work. They should not compare the work that God had given them to do with the work that He'd given their ancestors to do. It was two separate things. They just had to simply, okay, let's just do whatever it is that God tells us to do. And don't be worried about those pesky Samaritans and this and that and the other. When God said rebuild the temple, then get busy rebuilding the temple. And so here they just had to believe that God had called them and that He was going to do what He said He was going to do to lift them up. Now, the third one there with the unrealistic expectations, their duty was to learn from the priest who would remind them of the Lord's will and from what God had said in the Torah. And that if they would do that, if they would obey the concept, the precepts of the Torah and the laws and mitzvah, then God would bless them. And they had to take hold of that. They had to take a bite out of that apple. Oh, that's a bad deal. But that they had to take a hold of that promise that obedience to God's laws leads to blessing from God. Okay, Carmen, you had a comment, question?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, so they should have been, and you do need encouragement for this at times, but should have been living as if they believed what God said.
Yeah.
Just continue every day. Is what we're supposed to do. Yeah.
And that's the problem. They weren't they were not walking the walk and talking the talk.
Right.
Yeah. Rabbi, I'd like to make a comparison between because you're sharing how the older people there who are old enough to remember the first temple, they were so discouraged by the fact that this is not going to be exactly the same, that they did not put their support behind it. And it reminds me, I remember we went to a pro-Israel rally in New York City, because there's the Durban II Council, is a Palestinian thing that was going on in South Africa, and it was just another case of just blaming Israel for everything. But there was a group there at this rally called Neterai Karta, which it's an ultra-Orthodox group that actually were in favor of Palestinian control of the land, because according to their interpretation of the Torah, that only the Messiah could reinstitute the nation of Israel.
Exactly.
And that any nation other than that was illegitimate. So these are ultra-Orthodox Jews who were were demonstrating against our demonstration, in which most Jews support, but they were demonstrating against the nation of Israel, it's because of their limited perspective, because of what they felt Israel had to be. It had to be instituted by Messiah. And it's very much exactly what we're seeing here in Haggai, where the oldsters were looking at it and saying, "Oh, this is nowhere near what the first temple was like, and we're not going to put our support behind it."
Right. That's that's a good point. And these people, if they had seen the destruction of the temple, the first temple, and they could remember it, okay, and then 70 years later, these people then would be a minimum of 75 years old or more, depending on how you count all that stuff up and into their 90s. And so people from in those age brackets, 75 and on up, they tend to be just a little bit on the grouchy side sometimes. And not everybody that's 75 is grouchy, but sometimes they are. But that they had lived through the whole exile, and so in many ways they were slap worn out, and they just didn't have any faith, and so they were the kind of people that can point out the problems, but they can never point out solutions. And so that's sometimes our work that we do for the Lord is hindered by that kind of an attitude from people that, oh, that's never going to work. I remember back, when I was a kid or this, and that, you hear people talk about, oh, the old time revivals that we have, the church is nothing today, or people just don't have any morals. They don't believe in anything, and they need to get back to old time revivals. And
the epitaph of every great revival or every great move of God are the words, "But we've always done it this way."
Right. It's like they're saying, no, if we can't have our big, beautiful, all inlaid temple, we don't want anything. Small won't do it. We're not starting small. We can't go back or lesser. It won't be holy or something. I don't know, and that's wrong. I mean, you take what you get.
In a way, it was one of those things that, well, if I can't have it this way, I don't want it at all, and one of the things that had come out of the Babylonian exile was an attitude, or I guess it was an attitude that was fostered by people like Ezra and Nehemiah and Daniel and other ones that okay, this has befallen us because we did not follow God's laws. We did not obey him. We did not do the Shemitah. We did not do the Yovel. We did not do all of these things that God had told us to do. So now we're going to be in exile for 70 years because the land is going to have its rest. And so we don't have a temple anymore. We don't have Jerusalem. We don't have the altar. We don't even really have access to animals to sacrifice anymore. So what do? Well, the prevailing attitude became, well, we do the very best that we can with what we have. And one of those things was that, okay, we can't do the sacrifices, but we still remember the prayers that went along with the sacrifices. So we can do the morning the prayers for the morning sacrifice. When you have the Tamid sacrifices early in the morning, and then the Tamid sacrifice at the end of the day, and then the ones throughout the day. We'll say the prayers, and then we'll substitute the idea of the sacrifices with something else, and as we call the tzedakah, the charity, our charitable giving, and so forth. So that's how we're going to get around. But the whole thing was
Worship God. Yeah.
You do the best you can.
Yes.
What you got. And that's kind of what we do at Tree of Life sometimes with suffering through this summer of no air conditioning, we do the best we can with what we got, and my attempts to fix stuff have not yet worked, but well, we'll see how that all works out. But we just do the best we can with what we have.
We live in an imperfect world.
Yes, we do. We live in an imperfect world, and that's where people kind of, sort of, sometimes question me. I'm not saying they criticize, but they just question us in the past. Well, why don't you follow the feasts exactly? That on this day you have a holy convocation, and I tell them, I said, well, for one thing. Each extra day that we do, the church we rent from charges us $500 for that event. And then number two, sometimes those events fall on their use or their day of the for that facility. This year is an example. Erev Yom Kippur, the Kol Nidre service, is on a Wednesday night. Well, Wednesday they have activities for their youth on Wednesday, and in the gym where we set up for our worship. And so when I submitted all that this year, the facilities manager said, nope, can't do it. But then I had already talked to the pastor, and the pastor went to him and said, no, listen, this is Yom Kippur. This is the holiest day of the year for them. And so that would be like us saying, well, let's move Easter to next Tuesday instead of on Sunday when it normally is. And then they said, oh yeah, okay, that's right. So we will be doing our Kol Nidre service on Wednesday night, and then the next morning, of course, Thursday morning, they don't have anything, so that's not a problem. But people would ask, why don't you do them then? And because number one, maybe it's not available, and number two, it was very expensive, and at the time we didn't have money to do that sort of stuff with. And but I think the last few years we've done all of the convocation, the holy convocation on the day that's supposed to have it. The Shmini Atzeret we will finish off at Sukkot, and but we do combine that with Simchat Torah because it's the same day, one day after the other, and then that way we do have our holy convocation that's required by the Bible, and then the next one is this rolling back the scrolls, the Simchat Torah. We combine the two of them, and it turns out to be a really, really nice evening when we do that. And so anyway, we're getting back. I think we need to get back to where I was. If I could actually find out where we were. I guess finally the fourth one, in regard to the unnecessary fears. People's their duty was to be patient. Now, they might not see a reversal of conditions in the immediate future, but eventually God was going to restore his people as he promised. It might not have been in their lifetime, and indeed it was not. But God operates in his time frame and his own schedule, and not on ours. And so that's one of the things that we have to in our lives just remember. I mean, how many of our ancestors and our family and so forth have been looking for the return of the Messiah, all the time. And us growing up, we were always looking for the second coming, and it hadn't happened yet. It's been 75 years for me from since I was born. And he hadn't showed up yet, and then people will ask me, when is it going to be? I said, well, look for the rebuilding of this third temple in Jerusalem, because I believe the way I read it is that there has to be another temple, sacrifices started, a treaty with the world, a peace treaty with the world, and then 3.5 years into that, the treaty is broken, the temple is desecrated, and then 3.5 years after that, you can start looking every day for the return of the Messiah. So those are some of the conditions that as I read it, before the Messiah returns, before Yeshua returns, and so that. But basically, those things that he told them to do, we pretty much need to do the same things today. Just quit belly aching and taking care of our own business. Get back to work, and when things get a little bit tough, we'll just suck it up, Buttercup, and keep on working for the Lord, and keep getting into Torah, reading the scriptures, and going to synagogue and listening to the long-winded rabbi talk about stuff, and then just be patient, because God is he's working in his own time frame, his own schedule. And sometimes, he works outside of time and space. And so we don't sometimes see what's going on, but anyway, we have to have faith. And one of the quotes I'd read, it says, "Our business is to care for his things, and his gracious business is to care for us in all things." And so I thought that was kind of neat. So anyway, we're going on, and I just got a whole bunch of stuff. So let's actually get into at least the first verse tonight, and that may be just as far as we get. I'm not real sure. And let me find okay. Are there any other comments or questions on all of this background that I've started here? And I was talking to my wife today about, man, I've got so much background information, because this is the first prophet, first of the minor prophets that was actually after the destruction of the temple, and there's a whole different historical I don't know what you'd call that, in play here. And
it's a different environment for sure.
Yeah, certainly a different environment. Yeah, and the paradigm is completely different than it was back in Isaiah's day, or Jeremiah, and so forth. So anyway, in the second year of King Darius, in the 6th month, on the first day of the month, the word of Adonai came through Hggai the prophet to Zerubbabel, and son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, son of Jehozadak, and he was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. So, if we date this stuff, and people a lot smarter than me had to do all this dating stuff, but it equates to the 29th of August, 520 BCE. Now, like Ezekiel, Jonah, and Zechariah, the book of Haggai does not have a formal title. It was just him talking to the governor, to the high priest, to the priest, to the people, and he would just send them a message. And so his name, Zerubbabel, was his name was meant born in Babylon, or seed of Babylon, and that's kind of an allusion to his birthplace. And Joshua means Adonai saves. So the prophet, through the prophet Haggai, this message went to those guys and to all of the Israelites also. Now, We talked about how that Zerubbabel was the political governor or the overseer of the Persian province of Judah. And then when they let the people come back, the king made him the guy in charge. He was actually a descendant of David, so he could very well have been they could have, I guess, made him a king as such, but the Babylonians didn't, or the Persians, whoever was in charge at that point, said, "Nah, we don't really need a king over here. We're just going to call you governor," and that was fine. But that's what his title would have been. He would not have had the authorities and the glory and the independence if he was a king. But anyway, he was a descendant of King David, and it says he apparently had two fathers. Now, how did that happen? So, perhaps his father by adoption, Pedaiah, was his uncle. If Pedaiah was married to Shealtiel's wife after Shealtiel had died, then it was through a levirate marriage. When somebody a guy dies without heirs, then uh, his brothers were required to then take the wife into their home, and she became their wife to raise up children to their dead brother. And so that was probably not a real popular thing that went on back in those days, because I mean, going and having children.
That's actually part of this past week's story portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you read this past week's story portion, it mentions that if the man dies childless, that was the duty of his brother to perform the duty.
Yep. And so hopefully your brother had good taste in women. Otherwise, oh Lord have mercy. So and a lot of guys didn't want to do it. They just did not want to, and for reasons of inheritance, they did not want to split up what they had with and basically give their brothers progeny the inheritance that should have gone to their own. And so, there was some pushback on that stuff, but it was a law that God put out, and they were obligated to do that. So, anyway, then there's another option, is that one of these men was actually a more distant ancestor of Zerubbabel, maybe your grandfather. You know how that the Bible sometimes says so and so, son of such and such. And well, such and such was actually his great grandfather, but he was a son of that one. He was a descendant of, not an actual son of. And so Yehoshua here was a high priest in the restoration community, and he was a descendant of Aaron. He was the son of Jehozadak, who had gone into captivity, Babylonian captivity, and died out there. And he was apparently the grandson of Sariah, who was the high priest when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem. And then also his grandfather was executed at Riblah, and you can read that in 2 Kings and Jeremiah 52 and so forth. So, but the Lord gave his first message on the first day of the 6th month in the 2nd year that Darius the First was he ruled over Persia, and this was Elul 1, okay, and it corresponds to our August 29th for that year. And so when the Israelites came back from Babylonian captivity, they just continued to follow the Babylonian calendar, and even some of the names that they used, because they'd become so accustomed to them in the 70 years. And every once in a while, I hear people talk about that, how could the Jews follow those pagan months, like Tammuz and so forth. And I said, well, how do we follow January, or March, who is Mars, or going down July, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar. And so, those kind of arguments are, they're not important. And so the meaning of Haggai's name is festal or festive one. And it's appropriate that God gave him this prophecy that that the people would have. This is so different than the other minor prophets, because all the other ones were all doom and gloom, and this guy was a cheerleader. And so it kind of worked out that way. And if they would, and they did actually repent, they got to work, and God blessed them. So anyway, it's interesting to note that in most of the Old Testament writings, the writers dated things by reference to a king of Judah or Israel. But the Jews had no king in Haggai's day, so they were under control of a Gentile ruler, and so they basically counted the days, the times, according to that ruler that they had at that point. And so these counting of the times, we still have a dual calendar. We have a Gregorian calendar, and we have the Jewish calendar, and that's all going to keep on going until the Yeshua comes and establish his reign on the earth. And I'm sure at that point, then we're going to revert back to, guess what? The first of Nisan is going to be the first day of the year. And that's just going to make a lot of Christians' head explode. So anyhow, I got through verse 1, and it's kind of like our Torah Club classes on Shabbat. I got through verse 1. I got through the first page. So I want to continue on then next week then with verse 2, and we'll finish off the chapter. There's still a lot of stuff in that chapter. Then the following week we'll do chapter 2. So if any comments or questions that anyone would have with us today, I'm going to stop the share and
just the Hggai is a very meaty book. there's a lot here.
There really is. It's a lot that you look at and say, well, this really does apply to us today too.
And it's interesting. We don't need to rush through it.
Well, I got through one verse. What
there
can
you go. We did good. We learned a lot. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and we'll bail out of the YouTube, and that